We've got breaking news in Brett Favre's defamation lawsuit against sports commentator Pat McAfee. Brett Favre has just filed an amended defamation complaint, adding additional details. He did this in response to Pat McAfee's motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim, which I covered in my last video on this case. In this video, we're going to look at highlights from Brett Favre's new revised complaint. So here we have Brett Favre's new amended complaint filed on April 14th, 2023. And an amended complaint is basically just a revised complaint where Favre has added new details needed to state a claim in this amended complaint. So I'm not going to repeat all of the allegations that we have already heard in Brett Favre's original complaint. We've got some new allegations that Favre and his lawyer have added to the complaint, beginning with paragraph 23. Paragraph 23 reads, McAfee knew that or had a high degree of awareness of the fact that he had no basis for his false statement that Favre had stolen money from poor people. Before making his false statements, McAfee, who had no personal knowledge of any of the relevant facts, relied on the media reports that Favre was named as one of numerous defendants in a civil lawsuit, emphasis there on civil lawsuit, brought by the Mississippi Department of Human Services to recover state funds that MDHS itself and others had allegedly misused. No media report or anything or anyone else had stated that Favre had actually stolen any money from anyone. That's key, and that's something that I pointed out in my last video on this case. Favre goes on to say that, in fact, many of those same reports stated that criminal charges had been brought against certain of the defendants. We know that they were brought against Nancy New and her son, but not against Favre. He goes on to say, likewise, even if McAfee had himself reviewed the court filings in the MDHS civil litigation or any government documents, none of the filings in that action or in any other legal proceeding or any government documents whatsoever had alleged or argued that Favre had stolen any money from anyone. All of these facts have remained true through the present day. No reputable media report or official document has ever stated that Favre stole any money from poor people in Mississippi or from anyone else anywhere else. Accordingly, an NBC News article from September 14, 2022 reported that communications produced in the civil litigation did, quote, not establish that Favre knew the public funds discussed were welfare money. Thus, when McAfee uttered the remarks at issue, either, number one, he knew that his remarks were fabrications and the products of his imagination, or number two, he harbored serious doubts about whether his remarks were true and in fact knew that they were probably false. Yet he uttered the remarks anyways, without caring whether he was speaking truthfully or falsely, ultimately to cast Favre in the worst possible light. Moreover, as a sports commentator and a fellow former NFL player, McAfee was generally familiar with Favre's career and life story. McAfee was aware that throughout Favre's life, Favre had never committed and had never even been accused of committing theft, larceny, fraud, or any other such crimes. McAfee's knowledge of Favre's background, combined with McAfee's awareness that there was no basis for stating that Favre had stolen money, caused McAfee to know that his statements were false, or at a very minimum to have a high degree of awareness that they were inherently improbable and probably false. Yet McAfee pressed forward and jumped to a baseless conclusion, contradicted by the very reports he relied on, all for the sake of a hot take without regard to the ensuing harm to Favre's name. When McAfee made his false statements, he was aware that stealing from poor people is a serious crime in all states, including Mississippi, and that accusing someone of stealing from poor people is a serious accusation. And I can't help but laugh at this. As a native English speaker, McAfee knew that stealing means to knowingly and unlawfully take the property of another with intent to keep it. McAfee was also aware that in the modern media landscape, scandal, controversy, and notoriety sell. McAfee thus deliberately advanced a serious and provocative accusation against Favre, despite knowing that his accusation was false, or at a minimum, despite entertaining serious doubts about whether his accusation was true, because making such a serious, provocative, and inherently improbable accusation could generate publicity and attention for his media channel, which could usher in financial rewards and other benefits. So he's saying, here's the motive. Money was the motive. Of course, McAfee could care less whether or not what he was saying about Favre was true or false. He just said it because he knew it would rile up his audience. Then it goes on to say in paragraph 29 that McAfee has not merely misinterpreted articles and documents about a complex litigation. Rather, McAfee's awareness of no media reports, government documents, or court filings stating that Favre had stolen money from poor people. Far from it, reports on and filings in the MDHS litigation indicated that Favre did not knowingly receive welfare funds and that, unlike others, Favre was not charged with a crime. Combined with McAfee's awareness of Favre's background and McAfee's motivation to spread a scandalous falsehood shows that McAfee made the defamatory statements while knowing that they were false, or at a minimum, with a high degree of awareness that they were probably false. And I just made a note here. The reason we keep seeing this exact same phrase over and over in Favre's amended complaint is because that is needed to prove actual malice. And McAfee argued primarily in his motion to dismiss that Favre had failed to state a claim for defamation of a public figure because he did not state adequate allegations to prove actual malice. And so here we see the actual malice language repeating over and over and over again in this amended complaint to silence that argument that was made in McAfee's motion to dismiss. Then in paragraph 31, it states that McAfee's refusal to retract his defamatory statements further demonstrates that McAfee is purposely avoiding the truth, intentionally neglecting to investigate further, and deliberately maintaining his accusation to benefit from the gravity, controversy, and inherent improbability of his defamatory remarks. And then it says, simply put, McAfee will not back down because the lie is the point. McAfee insists on knowingly peddling lies about Favre because doing so helps McAfee accumulate more social media views, likes, and followers. That is probably a true statement, except for we don't really know what McAfee is doing other than he knows that he's generating a lot of views and interest in this subject because of his inflammatory statements about Favre. And then it goes on to say, further evidencing his malice, McAfee addressed this defamation action on his podcast and again refused to retract or apologize for the statements. He instead stated, our job is to report the news. We owe the sports media world our coverage of it, and we take our job very seriously as journalists. And of course, he said that in a very joking way, but he still said it. McAfee's reference to his purported journalistic integrity, and you can see that's dripping with sarcasm here, further precludes any suggestion that McAfee was merely engaging in comedic jest or hyperbolic rhetoric when he accused Favre of serious crimes. And this is, of course, in response to McAfee's motion to dismiss argument, where he's saying that his statements were mere hyperbole and they were comedic in nature, not intended to be taken as statements of fact about Favre, and that anybody in his audience would have known that he was not being serious and he didn't really believe or wasn't really accusing Favre of committing any kind of crime. Then in paragraph 34, we have some really fiery language by Brett Favre accusing McAfee of doubling down on his lies. In a tweet referencing this defamation action, he urged his followers not to allegedly, reportedly steal from those who need it most. Through McAfee's own words, McAfee has erased any doubt that he was knowingly peddling lies about Favre. And then it goes on to say in paragraph 36, McAfee should be held responsible for his lies and compelled to pay Favre for the damage he has caused, as well as punitive damages for his reprehensible conduct. If you like this video and you don't want to miss any of my future updates on this case, then make sure to hit that subscribe button below and turn the bell notification icon on. And of course, as always, thank you for watching.